Affordability in the U.S. is not evenly distributed. While national housing prices and daily expenses continue to rise, a smaller group of states remains structurally inexpensive due to long-term economic and demographic conditions. In these places, low costs are not temporary bargains. They are the outcome of slower population growth, limited wage competition, and housing markets that never entered national price cycles. This video looks at 10 U.S. states where living costs stay consistently low. Each one appears here for a different reason, and each reveals why affordability often comes with constraints. Let's begin. Number 10, Michigan. The cost structure in Michigan begins with a mismatch of scale. The state still carries infrastructure built for a much larger population than it has today, and housing prices reflect that imbalance. Across the state, typical home values remain near $220,000, a level more than $150,000 below the current national midpoint. In former manufacturing cities, prices drop further because supply continues to exceed demand. Rent tells a similar story, but for a different reason. Average monthly rent remains close to $1,000 not because of policy, but because population density never recovered after industrial decline. Utilities and insurance costs stay moderate, supported by abundant freshwater and limited climate extremes. Michigan became cheap when people left faster than housing could disappear. That gap never fully closed. Number 9, Indiana. Indiana's low-cost profile is shaped by geography rather than economic decline. The state sits at the center of the Midwest, close to major labor markets, yet avoids their price pressure. Housing prices typically hover around $230,000, staying well below national levels even as nearby regions grow more expensive. This happens because construction has kept pace with demand instead of lagging behind it. Rent and daily expenses remain restrained. Monthly rent averages around $1,100, while transportation and utilities benefit from short commutes and low congestion. State tax policy emphasizes predictability, keeping long-term costs stable. Indiana stays affordable because access does not automatically trigger migration waves. Number 8, Missouri. In Missouri, low living costs are most visible inside its cities. Unlike many states, urban living here never detached from regional price levels. In metropolitan areas, home prices remain clustered around $225,000, a figure rarely seen in cities of comparable size nationwide. This is not driven by regulation, but by weak population growth over several decades. Rental markets reflect the same pressure gap. Typical rents sit near $1,100, while utility and insurance costs stay moderate due to low demand and aging housing stock. Missouri is cheap because its urban systems operate below saturation, keeping costs anchored even as cities function normally. Number 7, Arkansas. Arkansas remains inexpensive because demand never caught up with supply. Living costs remain roughly 15% below the national average, with housing absorbing most of that gap. In many counties, homes are priced at levels last seen nationally more than a decade ago. Typical purchase prices cluster around $210,000, a figure that reflects limited wage competition rather than market correction. Rent behaves differently here. Monthly rents often stay under $1,000 because population density remains low even near job centers. Utilities and groceries add little pressure due to short travel distances and lower service costs. The economic base explains the pricing. Employment options are narrow and wage ceilings remain low. With few migration surges, housing markets never tighten. Arkansas remains cheap because competition for jobs, housing, and land never intensified. Number 6, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's affordability comes from price-to-income alignment rather than collapse. Overall living expenses sit about 10% below the national average, even in cities with steady employment. Home prices rise and fall slowly here. Typical values hover near $235,000, but the key factor is pace. Construction expanded alongside demand, preventing sharp price acceleration. Rent levels remain close to $1,000 per month, supported by low congestion and modest land constraints. Energy costs stay relatively low, reducing monthly volatility. The economy provides stability rather than surge. Energy, logistics, and services keep employment intact without triggering wage-driven bidding wars for housing. Oklahoma stays affordable because growth advances in step with capacity. Number 5. Kentucky. Kentucky's cost structure is defined by geographic diffusion. Instead of one dominant metro pulling prices upward, costs spread evenly across smaller markets. Housing prices commonly settle around $220,000, but the more telling figure is land value. Rural and semi-rural areas keep ownership accessible even as cities expand. Rental costs remain near $1,000, while daily expenses stay subdued due to low density and limited congestion. Property tax levels add little cumulative pressure over time. The economic structure explains this balance. Industries remain traditional and regionally focused, limiting sudden wage spikes that would strain housing supply. Population levels have stayed mostly flat for years. Without concentrated inflow, affordability remains intact. Number 4. Alabama. In Alabama, low living costs are best understood through long-term household burden rather than headline prices. Overall living expenses remain about 14% below the national average, largely because fixed costs stay low over time. Home ownership illustrates this clearly. In many parts of the state, annual housing costs consume a much smaller share of income than the national norm, with typical home values sitting near $215,000. That gap compounds year after year rather than disappearing. Rent follows a similar pattern but through scale. Monthly rent often stays close to $1,000, while utilities and insurance costs remain restrained due to low congestion and modest service demand. The reason affordability holds is geographic. Outside a handful of metro areas, population density remains thin, preventing sustained upward pressure on prices. Alabama stays cheap because long-term financial load never accelerates. Number 3. Mississippi. Mississippi stands apart because every major cost category sits at the bottom nationally, not just housing. Overall living expenses are estimated at nearly 20% below the national average, the lowest in the country. Housing prices reflect that position. Typical home values remain near $190,000, a level far removed from national trends. Rental markets reinforce the gap, with monthly rents often under $900. Daily expenses deepen the difference. Electricity, groceries, childcare, and basic services cost substantially less than national norms, reducing cumulative monthly pressure. The explanation is structural. Limited industry diversity caps wages, which in turn caps prices. Demand never reaches levels that would force adjustment. Mississippi remains inexpensive because purchasing power and prices remain locked in the same low equilibrium. Number 2. West Virginia. West Virginia's low costs are driven by long-term housing price collapse rather than moderation. The state records the lowest housing values in the U.S. by a wide margin. Typical home prices often sit near $150,000, less than half of current national benchmarks. In many counties, prices fall even lower, reflecting decades of population loss rather than short-term decline. Rent levels mirror ownership costs. Monthly rents commonly remain under $900, while utilities and transportation expenses stay low due to short travel distances and limited urban spread. Economic contraction explains the numbers. Industrial decline reduced long-term demand, and outmigration prevented recovery. Even with remote work increasing interest, scale remains small. West Virginia stays cheap because demand never rebuilt after structural loss. Number 1. Tennessee. Tennessee rises to the top because low costs coexist with active population growth, a combination rarely sustained over time. Overall living expenses remain around 10% below the national average, even as demand continues to increase. Housing prices illustrate this balance through contrast rather than gap. Typical home values now approach $270,000, higher than several states on this list, yet still far below the national midpoint near $400,000. What matters is that prices rose alongside supply, not ahead of it. Rent behaves differently again. In cities like Nashville and Chattanooga, monthly rent often settles around $1,300, higher than surrounding states but still under national urban norms. Utilities and transportation costs remain moderate, limiting total monthly strain. The absence of a state income tax shifts the equation. While other taxes apply, take-home income remains less compressed, allowing costs to feel lighter even as prices edge upward. Tennessee remains inexpensive because growth expands outward instead of concentrating inward. Affordability in the U.S. is shaped by long-term forces rather than short-term pricing. Housing supply, income structure, population movement, and economic pace all interact to keep costs low in certain places while pushing them higher elsewhere. If this analysis was useful, like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.